It's Tuesday, February 3rd, and before this week is over, millions of Americans are going to wake up to weather they weren't expecting. Not a blockbuster storm, not something that screams danger on social media, but a setup that quietly causes problems. Travel delays, accidents, power issues, and damage in places that simply are not built for it. Cold air is locked in across the eastern half of the country. Florida is dealing with conditions that feel almost unreal for this time of year. And a narrow band of snow is setting up across the Midwest and the Ohio Valley that could catch a lot of people off guard. Let me show you exactly who's at risk, what to watch, and why the next several days actually matter. Right now, winter is reminding us that it's not finished yet. Even though the calendar keeps moving forward, the atmosphere doesn't care what month it is. And what we're seeing is a pattern that has been stuck. When weather patterns get stuck, impacts start to stack up. Let's start in the southeast, because what's happening here is historic in its own quiet way. Freeze warnings are in effect across nearly the entire Florida peninsula. Wind chills are dropping into the 20s as far south as the Nature Coast. In some cases, parts of Florida are colder than areas of Montana and southern Canada. That alone should get your attention. But this isn't just about it feeling cold. This kind of cold creates real problems. Pipes that aren't insulated for freezing temperatures. Crops that can be damaged or completely lost. Infrastructure that isn't designed for prolonged cold stress. And people who simply don't have the clothing, heating setups, or experience to deal with conditions like this. Cold without snow is dangerous, especially in places that don't see it often. This is the kind of setup emergency managers really don't like. It's quiet. It doesn't look dramatic, but it can cause serious issues. And this is where people usually stop paying attention, and that's when problems start. Now, this cold isn't just a Florida story. Temperatures are running well below average from the Midwest through the Ohio Valley, the Appalachians, and into the Northeast. We're talking about teens stretching from Chicago down through parts of the Carolinas. It feels relentless because it has been. Here's why. Think of the jet stream like a conveyor belt that's stuck. Instead of moving weather systems along, it keeps feeding cold air into the same parts of the country over and over again. That's why winter feels endless right now. Even when warmer air tries to push east from the Pacific, it keeps getting blocked. The cold air wins again and again. But on top of the cold we already have, we're now adding another ingredient. Another disturbance is moving in. And this is not a classic, headline-grabbing winter storm. This is what I call a sneaky snow system. On paper, it doesn't look impressive. No big totals. No massive circulation. No dramatic satellite look. But this is exactly how people get caught off guard. As we move through tonight into early tomorrow morning, snow begins breaking out from parts of Missouri into Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky. By daybreak, snow could stretch from near St. Louis all the way toward Chicago, with lighter snow spreading eastward. At first, this looks harmless. Maybe a coating, maybe an inch. But by Tuesday afternoon, this system starts to organize. A narrow band of heavier snow is expected to develop from parts of Kentucky into southern Ohio and up into West Virginia. And timing is everything here. By mid-afternoon, right as people are heading home, snow could be falling steadily along parts of Interstate 64, Louisville, Lexington, Cincinnati, Charleston. Roads could go from fine to slick very quickly. Again, not dramatic, just disruptive. This is the kind of snow that causes accidents not because it's intense, but because people underestimate it. As this system continues east, lighter snow may reach into parts of Pennsylvania, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and up toward Pittsburgh. In many of these places, totals may only be a coating to an inch. But all it takes is one untreated bridge, one elevated roadway, one burst of snow during rush hour, and suddenly you've got a problem. This won't trend on social media, but it absolutely affects real life. High-end snowfall totals with this system are not extreme. At the upper end, we're talking about maybe 2 inches in parts of northern Kentucky, southern Ohio, and western West Virginia. Around an inch in places like Lexington and Louisville. Less than an inch in Washington, D.C. But there is almost always one place that overperforms. One town, one county, one stretch of highway. And those are the places where people say, "Nobody told us about this." So let me be clear, this is me telling you. If you live anywhere from the Ohio Valley into the central Appalachians, this applies to you. Nothing about this looks dramatic. That's why it's dangerous. Once this system moves through, winter doesn't immediately let go. In fact, another surge of Arctic air looks likely later this week. Strong winds high in the atmosphere continue pulling cold air straight out of Canada and into the eastern United States. This could set the stage for another notably cold stretch around February 7th, potentially memorable in terms of wind chills and overall impact. Cold like this adds up. Infrastructure fatigue, higher energy demand, increased risk for people without reliable heating. But after that, and this matters, we finally start to see signs of change. As we head deeper into February, the jet stream begins to loosen up. Instead of one dominant trough locked over the east, we see a more active, wave-like pattern develop. That means alternating bursts of warmer air moving east, followed by cooler air sliding into the west. This flip-flop pattern is normal for late winter, but it also opens the door for storms. Now, I want to be very clear here. What I'm about to talk about is not a forecast. It is not set in stone. It is simply a signal, a heads-up. As we approach mid-February, especially the window from around the 14th through the 21st, we start to see a pattern that could support more active weather across parts of the central and southern United States. This is not about snow. This is about spring-style systems. That could mean thunderstorms, and in some cases, strong storms. Details will change. Another winter storm is still possible. But this is the first time in a while we've seen a signal like this, and it's worth watching. Areas to keep an eye on include parts of Texas, Oklahoma, the lower Mississippi Valley, and the Tennessee Valley. Cities like San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Shreveport, and up toward Nashville. If you live anywhere from central Texas into the lower Ohio Valley, this is something to be aware of, not alarmed about, but aware. This is one of those stretches where checking the forecast actually changes outcomes. Looking at the broader outlook, temperatures are still expected to average below normal across much of the eastern U.S. over the next couple of weeks. But warmer-than-average conditions may finally begin taking hold across parts of Texas, the Plains, and into the Midwest. For places like Tennessee and Mississippi, where many people are still dealing with power issues from an ice storm weeks ago, even a modest warm-up could make a big difference. Winter isn't done with us yet, but it is changing, and the next 10 days matter. Small shifts in timing, temperature, or storm track could affect travel, power, and safety for millions of people. I'll be tracking this closely and bringing updates as soon as anything changes, because the next update could shift plans. Thanks for watching. Stay aware, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next update.